ಒಬ್ಬ ಹುಡುಗ ನಿಂಗೆ ಹೊಡಿತಿದ್ದಾನೆ, ಆದರೆ ಎಂತ ಹೊಡಿತಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಅವಾಗ ನಿನ್ನ ತಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಎಂತ ಹೊಡ್ಬೋದು? ಫುಲ್ ಕನ್ಫ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಆಗೋದಲ್ಲ.
In one of the fiery scenes of the much celebrated Kannada thriller Ulidavaru Kandanthe, Richie, one of the central characters of the movie, breaks the fourth wall, asking the audience, "Are you confused?" Well, yes, for someone watching the movie for the first time, confusion prevails, at least through the majority of the film, until slowly you start figuring out the connection between all the open threads and then realize how this confusion itself was a major thematic point of this film. And then if you rewatch the film once more, being aware of what lies ahead, you get to teeth into the brilliance of the film. Pick up the subtle clues spread across and relish one of the most courageous attempts made in Indian cinema in the last decade. We watched the film back to back twice, thanks to the recommendations from so many of you, and here we are today trying to analyze how confusion, action and vision builds up the thematic universe of Rakshit Shetty's Ulidavaru Kandanthe, as we the audience also become a part of it. Prudence is foresight and far-sighted vision. Perhaps that's what defines Raghu all the way from his childhood. There's this childhood incident where Raghu is harassed by a bully and his friend Richie stabs the bully kid to death in rage. Richie follows his instincts of heart without thinking much about how this action might impact his future, and it leads him to 8 years in the remand home. But Raghu, the far-sighted one, reacts with his head. He flees from his hometown to Mumbai and avoids remand custody like Richie. When aware of his father's death and his mother's lonely life in Malpe, he still doesn't give in to his emotions, and his foresight reminds him what might happen if he leaves Mumbai and what might be waiting for him in Malpe. And then when he returns to his hometown, he has a definite plan in mind to take his mother with him to Dubai and the necessary resources to get things done for them. Like water, he flows so as to release pressure and keeps on changing directions to avoid friction to the best possible extent. But like in optics, far-sightedness might have this one issue. Things nearby get blurry at times. Raghu, in spite of all his prudence, doesn't realize that the news of him carrying the red bag with the uber valuable inside has already reached Malpe. He, having always valued caution over emotion, fails to realize the outburst his mother is expected to have once he returns to her. We might be confused how Richie gets to know about Raghu's return, whether through the connections of Shankar Pujari, the local goon, or through his mother's ecstatic relays in the market. But either way, it gets him into trouble. Action without vision is confusion. It is like the fire without control, and Richie embodies that fire. Rakshit Shetty is terrific as Richie, towing the lines between being heroic, ruthless and funny. He is the near-sighted one in contrast to Raghu, and is all lost in his small town of Malpe, living for the moment. His actions always overshadow his vision, almost always having the glasses on when on his own, or perhaps he doesn't have a vision at all, thanks to his experiences. His friend deserts him in crisis. His father doesn't stand by him in time of need, and now he is the blind follower of whatever Shankar Pujari asks, who must have given him shelter he always looked for. If Shankar sends him to mow a lawn, he will mow down a jungle instead, is what we hear someone say. And as he never pre-plans his actions, the characters around him end up confused to what he might be doing next and why. And there's where Raghu's prudence fell apart, as well as his foresight too is unable to comprehend the confusion that Richie is. Vision without action is daydream. That is Munna for you. Always dreaming about the lady he loves, but never taking the next step to act on his dreams. You see, had Munna been closer to Sharda, Balu's sister, in talking terms, he might be informed about Balu's return before taking the irreversible step. In this beautifully shot scene, we watch how Munna was so close to finding the truth, both literally and figuratively, but it's assumptions like his dreams that take him on the wrong route. It's also not that he takes the actions in his senses. It's the suspicion based on what Dinesh said at Shankar's place. Here's a comment about the bloodstains on the boat and above all the weed puff that he smokes and loses his senses altogether. He discards the weed only a day back after a drag as he cannot control the high. But when he finds Sharda worried, his dreams take a setback and he gives in to the weed. And then, like the uncalled wind, he extinguishes the fire of Richie in a blow. And it is as if the two misplaced forces negate each other by the end. Hallucination is the vision that others cannot see. Balu, that is, lost in his weeds and unique perceptions of his surroundings, the space or the vacuum. And that brings us to the most interesting turning point of the movie, as we mostly depend on what happened in the boat from what we hear from Balu. The man clearly doesn't have much control over his thoughts and visions, so are we really supposed to go by his version of the story where Richie kills Raghu? Or do we go by what Dinesh says at the end of the film, which then questions our entire build-up of proceedings that, with a lot of effort, we achieve at that point? Multiple shots of Dinesh plotting something in his mind across the film add up to the layers of confusion around whether to believe him or not. You might have wondered around the relevance of those shots earlier in the film, and now they come back to confuse you further. And then, when you come back to the story of Anthony Montana, the Cuban kid, and Vijay Dinanath Chauhan from Mandwa that Rakshit narrates over and over, that might be essentially the theme of the movie that applies to our watching experience as well as in life overall. What we see in the movie is how, be far-sighted or nearsighted, be living through your dreams or hallucinations, none of the characters have complete control of their existence and are at the mercy of perceptions and actions of the others. In fact, we the audience too are at the mercy of what we are being shown, and at the very end, through a statement from Dinesh, who is supposedly a secondary character across the movie, we are made to question our reasoning. The point of the movie is not what happened on that day. It is about whatever might have happened, we would have looked at from our own vision or frame of reference and would react to someone else's vision. And how we react depends on how obsessed we are with our own visions. As so many times in life, we cannot comprehend why someone else is so strange to us. Perhaps we are all victims of our own hallucinations, giving our own reasons to sell it as visions. And it is in this chaos, in reactions and connections of chaos, that Rakshit Shetty pays his tribute to Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction. And the best part is how he interprets this idea in the local setting of Udupi, Karnataka. The shining thing as the eternal object of desire is cleverly put across in the film, and as we find the name Marcellus Wallace as a potential buyer, it beautifully connects the world of this movie and Pulp Fiction, as if the same thing which caused chaos in the coastal town of India will now travel to United States to continue its trigger for confusion. And then using the backdrop of Yakshagana performance about Sri Madhavacharya's rescue of the Krishna idol from the sea, it also connects the same thing to our mythology. How wonderful, isn't it? Indian mythology talking to American Pulp Fiction through the innovative thinking of a daredevil young director in his debut directorial. It's also in the subtext of the supporting characters that the film works so cleverly. Say the brilliant Sohan Shetty as Democracy, the kid as a sidekick to Munna. On the surface, it's delightful to watch Democracy and his antics, but what do we see if we look figuratively as per the ideas we discussed earlier? We see Democracy asking for colored glasses from someone who represents confusion, and then someone who represents daydreams. Well, food for thought again, isn't it? Regina the journalist adds her own subtext to the narrative. In trying to collate pieces of the incidents from multiple sources and a vision coming through the reflection of the camera, Regina represents our convoluted understanding of what must have actually happened from what is translated to us through media. And lastly, let us talk about the one character where there's not much interpretations, perceptions or confusion. It's the mother, Ratnaka, or the fifth element of the earth in Rakshit's analogy of the 5 elements of life through the chapters and characters of the film. The mother is sad, alone, waiting for his son. There are no contradictions to this vision for any of us, whichever way we might want to interpret it. This middle segment of the film doesn't change. Perhaps that's also Shetty's homage to the mothers who wait for us through thick and thin. And then, my friends, whatever we said this far is just another perspective and is no better or lesser than what you already think about the film. Maybe it confuses you all the more, or maybe it clarifies things you felt before. But what we can't deny is how the film extends our limits of vision through its multiple interpretations and consistent disorientation. And that's what art is expected to do, as Rakshit Shetty and his team achieves. That is all from us today. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed what you watched, do consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a comment behind. Thank you.